why do you recognize this success stories?
They had this crazy idea in 1990, which was, let's create an antenna of Georgia Tech in math.
Georgia Tech Lorraine is our flagship international campus. It really is special to us, and it was the first campus that we had of international nature.
Georgia Tech Lorraine has this importance and credibility here because it's a part of Georgia Tech, Atlanta. As we say, there is only one Georgia Tech.
We are like a small Georgia Tech campus in the middle of Europe.
We adding a lane to the bridge over the Atlantic, but the bridge has traffic in both ways.
Georgia Tech Lorraine offers three main activities. You can have a green diploma here, you can do a high level research, and then you can start your career in Georgia Tech. So it's a place to be.
When I come into work every day, there's so many possibilities. If we imagine something and we can do it, we're really not holding back in terms of resources. We have everything we need here to do anything.
What we do here is we help them to transform these original ideas from research into usable devices continuously. That's our main mission.
Alumni have been successful in all areas, in academia, in research, in large corporations. Most of the corporate owners have come back to work with us. They have come back to hire altitudes.
Georgia Tech is a really good job of Georgia Tech Lorraine and helping you see how engineering is in a different environment, with different people and different cultures.
You will not get this experience anywhere else. You don't get the ability to take your classes in English, while also staying in a foreign country where they speak a whole other language.
It's unparalleled in terms of being able to study abroad and still take major classes that are really helping towards graduation because it is a Georgia Tech campus with Georgia Tech professors.
We've demonstrated that we would be successful. Now it's time to scale them in a way that we have to scale on our campus here in Atlanta. So the future is really bright for Georgia Tech Lorraine.
One of the things that I have most pride in, undergraduate students who come back to Atlanta and stop me on campus and say, sir, I wanted to tell you, this has really changed my life. I know where I'm going. I know what I can do now. I get it.
Joyce USA, Georgia Tech Lorraine. Congratulations, Georgia Tech Lorraine, on 30 years.
Vive Georgia Tech Lorraine and go Giants! Vive Georgia Tech Lorraine and go Giants!
Happy birthday, Georgia Tech Lorraine.
Vive Georgia Tech Lorraine and go Giants!
Happy birthday, Georgia Tech Lorraine. Go Jackets!
Happy birthday.
Georgia Tech Lorraine is a great adventure. University Georgia Tech has the guts to create something like this, and I can only encourage Georgia Tech to continue nurturing this little adventure here in France.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alessandro Hatami. I'm an alumnus from 1983, a civil engineering alumnus. So I'm really old, so that's one thing that you can appreciate. Welcome to the first Georgia Tech FinTech Forum in London. It's very exciting to see so many alumni. We actually are many more than this room suggests, but it's good that we have a first start at that. So today is our first event that we're trying to do to get the alumni together and to enable a better communication and engagement between the alumni and the school. We will have a number of illustrious speakers that come after me, much more articulate and elegantly spoken than I am. And they will tell you a bit about more about the school and about what the school has been up to and what their aspirations for the school are going to be. Also tell us about Georgia Tech Lorraine and all the activities that we're doing in France as the first major American university to establish themselves in Europe. I think that's a very interesting story to hear about. So I'd like to kind of list out all the important people that are here today, including Raphael, who's just sat down in front of us, who is the provost. We have Yves Bertolo, who is the president of Georgia Tech Lorraine. Yves, where are you? There you are. Siva Ragapati, is that correct? Ragupati. Where are you, Siva? There you are. Who is director of Createx and the chair of electrical engineering. Followed by Paul Voss, who's also at Georgia Tech Lorraine with Createx. George, who I can't see you without my glasses, there you are. And Sudhir, who is responsible for finance at the Scheller School of Business, and Sudhir was right there. And Keith McGregor also, who is the last but not least sitting there. We also are very lucky to have the three of the organizers of these things that I think we should really mention, which is Marta, who is sitting there. And guys, without her, we would not be here. Sandrine, who actually made everything that Marta thought out happen, and she's sitting over there. And John, who seems to be running around after everybody else in doing that. So we'll kick off today with a series of things. There will be a speech by, or presentations or discussions by some of the people I mentioned to you. And then we have three panels that I think you'll find quite interesting. So why don't we get off and start off with Rafael. Rafael, you're next.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? If I fade, raise your hand. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here, and I particularly enjoyed it because I was in the Paris meeting, when was it, 6 months ago? Yeah. How many of you were here? There, I'm sorry. So we get new blood, which is good. That was an excellent experience, and I think has motivated and inspired the idea of continuing to do this, because it represents maybe the Georgia Tech of the future and what it should be. You are it in many ways. So let me spend a few minutes and then really and truly open to questions. And I do think I have a few time for questions. So let me go quickly with just give you a sense of the institution and what's going on in the institution, but really and truly to motivate some further discussion. Things are really extraordinary well. We have a lot of exciting things happening that will carry the institution for many years to come. If you look at what has happened over the last decade, it's truly extraordinary. You have number of applicants from 10,000 to 36,000. In fact, this year we'll probably hit 37,500 for September application. The percent admits that has the good side and the bad side. You're going down to 23% from 63%. Early admission this year, the application for early admission, those are the group you handled first, were 20,000 applicants for early admission. And the average admission rate was 20%. That has, as I said, it implies that our quality and population is better. It also implies that a lot of very capable individuals do not make it in, simply because of capacity. If you are an international student, that becomes very tough. The admission rate for international undergraduate students is at 7%. So again, the competition is fierce. Maybe one of the extraordinary stories is the number of graduate applications. But more importantly, for the first time in the history of Georgia Tech, there are as many graduate students as there are undergraduates. So we have achieved that parity of graduates and undergraduates. A lot of that parity, though, of about 16,000 graduate students, about half of that, a little over half, is in online professional master's degree. And it really and truly at this point in two, because we just started a third, so I don't really count that one yet. So, which account for about 10,000 students between the two. Really extraordinary, with incredible satisfaction, very, very high quality, same professors, same degree you do if you go and do it residentially. That is an online Master of Science in Computer Science, the online Master of Science in Data Analytics, and the new one, the online Master of Science in Cybersecurity, which began this month with 250 students. That was the target, and we achieved this target. Another incredible story, the amount of research expenditures. We are up to $850 million. A dramatic change, almost a doubling of what it was just a decade
So it's really a great story. We have all sort of new initiatives. One of the initiatives I'm incredibly proud of, and one which I think will set the tone of the Georgia Tech of the future, but also higher education in the U.S., and I really mean it. It has had an impact in higher education like I didn't quite fully expect. I spend a lot of my time these days traveling around the United States and Canada and Europe talking about this. In fact, I just came from San Francisco right before coming here, where I was giving a talk about this topic. And it's a result of a commission that I put together about 2.5 years ago. It's called the Commission on the Next in Education. And they produce a report that is available, you can download it, and I urge you to download it. And that sort of looks at the Georgia Tech of 2040. What should be the Georgia Tech of 2040? And it's informed by a good analysis of what are the students, what are that we should expect in 2040. How are they going to look like? Where are they going to come from? What are the demographics? What are their backgrounds? What do we, how do they learn? So all those things are really and truly informing what this future education. Are you having trouble hearing me back there? It's better? Okay. All right. So you should have raised your hands. The report tries to inform what that will be, that education. It has an overarching concept, which is the Georgia Tech commitment. And the Georgia Tech commitment, if I can explain it to you in simple terms, is the argument that in the future, the idea that you would go to any higher education institution and a Georgia Tech and simply think of it as I go in at 18 and leave at 22 or leave at 26 or 27 if you do graduate degrees or whatever, that will disappear. That the boundaries will become a lot more porous, and we're going to have to engage early on in the K-12 arena. We already are. And there are K-12 students taking our courses, and we're going to engage with people like you constantly, but not simply in, I'm talking to you now, or getting together once a year, but you considering that you can always go back to Georgia Tech to pivot and change whatever you know and whatever new you need to know. And that idea then changes what education is about. It's not a punctual arrival and departure, but it's really an episodic coming in and out at different times. I like to think that many of you, unfortunately, in my opinion, always say about Georgia Tech when asked, when did you graduate? You always say, I did not graduate, I got out. Remember that? And I think in many ways, I understand it, but it has a bad connotation. What I really would like to convert Georgia Tech so that everybody says, once in Georgia Tech, I'm in forever. It is that idea that needs to change. It's that culture that needs to change. But it's not just a saying. It should be a reality where you really and truly connect all the time, come in and out. There's a series of initiatives that I cannot expand, and I really urge you to take a look at the report. It is very well written. It is very dense, though. It has a lot of material in it, and you have to read it carefully. And there's a third element that to achieve this, it's going to require for us to really change our way of doing business. We have to become what we call deliberately innovative. And we can do that, and we do that. Certainly in research, we tend to do that quite easier. But we have a harder time delivering education. And it should be the same. So we have to change the structures, we have to change the way of thinking. We have to change the culture to make that happen. There are a lot of ideas in there, and I repeat, I urge you to take a good look. Artificial intelligence use in everything from teaching assistants to advising. And we're already doing some of that. Use of blockchain technology to follow credentialing. So in many ways, the registrar become obsolete. And that is being done already. An interesting concept is the concept of the Georgia Tech atrium. Georgia Tech atrium is not an idea of having a campus in many different places. We only have one going on 2 campuses, and I don't think we're going to do that many others. But it's really hanging a shingle, having a presence in many parts of the US and the world. And the best way I can motivate it is the following way. I was talking to an individual in Atlanta. His name is David, and David started one of the shared spaces concepts in Atlanta some years ago, where you go in and you get a desk, or you get 3 desks, and you have your startup, and there are many startups in this building. And I asked David once, after this report, thinking of how do we implement this, what happens to the individuals that fail? And it happens all the time, you know that. Where do they go? And his response was really revealing to me, was they don't go anywhere. They just stay here. They either go with the startup next to them, or they just start something else. Once in the ecosystem, they're always in the ecosystem. And that ecosystem includes common spaces, it includes weekly or more lectures, it includes joint spatial workshops and programs, it includes Friday beer hour. We want to be part of that. That's what the atrium is all about, is to be present in places where individuals like you hang around, so that you can check in with your Georgia Tech and figure out what is it that they have now that I could use now, and how can we then serve you to achieve that goal. So we are implementing that, and I'll show you where we're going to do the first pilot of that in a second. Let's talk about the physical transformation of the institution. This is actually part of the educational reinvention of the institution, which we call Library Next. How many of you, when was the last time you checked a hardcover book from a library? So about 4 years, 3.5 years ago, we took all the books out of the library, all the hardcover books, and built a storage service center about 4.5 miles away together with Emory University. So all the books are there. If you want to go and touch them, or if you want them, they will be sent to you, and ultimately I will send them to you in a drone. That's the plan. So the 2 main library buildings that you may remember, the Tower and Price Gilbert, are being completely redone. The Tower, in fact, was just finished. We just reoccupied it, and Price Gilbert is just beginning to be completely trashed out, completely from scratch, into what I would describe a gathering place. Is really many different styles of gathering places within this complex. It's not the place where you store books. It's not the place necessarily, although there will be some spaces for that, where you're going to sit down and be quiet. In fact, I told the staff in the library and the dean of libraries that the last thing I wanted to see was a sign saying, "Shh." I don't want that. That's not what I think should be the library of the future. There should be some quiet places, but there are going to be some places in there that I hope are pretty rowdy. because they're meeting places, they're gathering places. I always say that when Alexandria began and the first library was invented, there were not that many books to store. We became a warehouse of books later. At that point, it was really a meeting place, a place where you converse, a place where you share ideas, a place where people like you, who are entrepreneurs, could come together. And that's what the library project is. And by the way, that's the tower on the left, and that's the way it looks right now. So it's really, really extraordinary, beautiful place. Some of the other transformations that are going on. Very important, the CODA building. This is about to be occupied in the next few months. It is 750,000 square feet. It is a joint private-public partnership between Georgia Tech and Portman Associates. It is a gorgeous place, absolutely gorgeous place. You can actually see it. It's all around data analytics and data. That's what's the subject matter. Computation, data analytics, and data. It has effectively a data center that is going to be managed by a private company. And we're occupying about half of that building. The other half is privately occupied. That's where the first atrium will be. The first pilot of the atrium will be. And it should gonna be right there, or part of that in there. So we're very thrilled about the whole experiment. It's gonna be, and CODA itself is gonna be an extraordinary experiment. A few other things, we're redoing the student center. We haven't begun that. This is the Candida building, which is a so-called living building. This is a building that we got a gift of about $30 million to put up, that is supposed to produce 105% of all the electricity it consumes and 105% of all the water it consumes. And it's all sustainable materials. It's really quite a challenge to do, particularly in the Southeast climate, to say the least. Then Tech Square Phase 3. This is going to be right across where the College of Business is. And it's going to have initially 3 buildings, 1, 2, and 3. This will come later. And one of them will house, or part of that building will house, an expansion of the College of Business, mostly for the graduate program. The other one, half of the other one will house the ISYE. So we'll finally bring together those 2 schools and college that have so much in common. So that's the idea with that, and that is looking pretty good. Then internationally, we are graduating from France. And in many ways copying the model of France, but we're going to do it in China, in Shenzhen. And that is moving pretty well. I hope that in April we'll actually officially cut the ribbon, I guess, for a transition campus. There is just a transition campus. Oops, I'm sorry. That really looks like that. And that will be there for how long? 2 years or 3? 3 or 4. Yeah. While they build a new campus in a partnership with Tianjin University. Also, and the campus will be in Shenzhen. The site is already picked. This is very exciting, and we hope that this will become much like France, where it's not only the graduate programs we'll be offering, but a lot of our undergraduates spending time in China. So that is really exciting. Finally, let me spend the last few slides talking about entrepreneurship. It is the name of the game. Most of our undergraduates and graduate students, but certainly the undergraduates, that's the mindset they have. It's part of their culture. And there are a variety of programs that promote it. The Venture Prize has been around for over 10 years now, incredibly successful. In fact, we expanded it to the ACC conference. All the colleges of the ACC now have an Inventure Prize. And now we just announced, or it was announced by the state of Georgia, that there is an Inventure for the whole state of Georgia. So the brand name has been borrowed, if I can put it that way. We do have the trademark of Inventure, but it's been incredibly successful. Most of the products that have come out of Inventure, most of the winners of Inventure are commercialized. CreateX, incredible success, and Siva will talk to you, I'm sure, about that. He is certainly the master of the universe when it comes to CreateX. But it's a very successful program where students learn, make, and launch their own companies in an integrated program. 115 startups, more than $150 million of total valuation so far, just in that program, not counting in venture and so on. The Venture Lab, and I think you're going to hear some about that also. 25 new companies a year. We guide them, we work together with them, we make them successful. ICOR, training and educating individuals of how to develop their own businesses, particularly scientists, professors, and so on. That's something that we are doing everywhere, including in Puerto Rico, quite successfully. Thank you very much. And I have some news for you soon about that. So I was just there. So I think that's been very, very well done, and I think it's a brand name for us. We are Advanced Technology, the ATDC, that's been around for quite a while. The outcome of that, 170 companies over the years, $12 billion invested on that, 90% success rate. That's hard to beat. So when you think of it, just in students, and Siva, correct me, the goal of CreateX ultimately is to go to 100 companies out of CreateX a year, and possibly even more in the future. But we are already generating 100 companies a year of students when I counted all the different programs, and I just spoke of a couple of them. So that is the future of Georgia Tech. That's what the students want. That's the concept. So in summary, the institute, your institute, is doing very, very well. A lot of initiatives in all dimensions. Most importantly are initiatives, in my opinion, that really change the way that higher education thinks. Things like entrepreneurship education, things like changing the way that higher education works, the next in education concepts. Those are the important things. So there's a bright, bright new future. And this, getting together, I believe, is planting the seed of what will be a routine event around many parts of the world. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Rafa. We now have Yves Bertolo tell us more about Georgia Tech Lorraine and what they've achieved there. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. So yeah, my name is Yves Bertolo. I'm based in Atlanta, but closely connected with the Georgia Tech Lorraine campus. Our faculty and students really are engaged all over the world in many different forms and shape. But I want to spend the next few minutes to highlight what's going on at GTL in Europe. And I hope, first of all, that to explain a little bit what we're doing. It's been successful. It's about 30 years right now. And as Raphael said, we are doing another campus in China. But these are really the anchors of our foreign engagement. At GTL, we have some exciting programs in entrepreneurship and research. And frankly, I hope that we can somehow find a way to find some mutually beneficial things to do. We need mentors, for instance, in our programs over there. If you're interested in that, that would be great. You'll hear more about the research and things. Maybe there's things. I would love to be able to connect more this very rich alumni network that we have all over Europe here, and thank you for coming today, with what we're doing in our hub in Europe, okay? So Georgia Tech is located in Metz. It's now about an hour away by fast train from Paris or the airport. It's really a great location, and our students from Atlanta just love to go there. Let's see, I think it's this one. No, it's this one. Yeah. Really, the way we think about it is we really have a hub that allows us to connect and really seize opportunities for education, for research, for innovation, entrepreneurship, and it's our hub in Europe. So it's every year we have about 700 students who come. Many of them are undergraduates from our Atlanta campus, and they come for a semester. At the graduate level, we have about 100 plus masters and maybe 30, 40 PhDs. At the graduate level, we focus in mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and computer science. But you see the numbers. We've had a very significant number of alumni graduating from Georgia Tech, having spent a semester or more at Georgia Tech Lorraine. The master's students pretty much come from Europe, mostly France for now, and they finished their program in Atlanta. So it's really a great two-way bridge between Europe and Atlanta. We have a lot of faculty who have spent a semester or more from Atlanta coming to teach in Metz, over 200, you know. So it's a great way for our students to interact. Let me point out that we started, as I said, about 30 years ago with master's program only. In 2006, we really established a very close partnership with the French entity called CNRS, the Center for National Research in France, and that has enabled our research to be really plugged in the ecosystem of European research. So now we're able to get, of course, EU grants, national grants from France, and so forth. And then in 2014, we established the Lafayette Institute. It's more focused about really higher TRL, if you will, and really innovation. I will mention more about that in a minute. The research program at GTL, we call it the UMI, that's the Joint National Lab, if you will, with Georgia Tech and CNRS. It's really focused on deep tech, essentially. And I've listed here the areas that we focus on. Materials, very important, nanotechnology, photonics, sensors, secure networks and optics, autonomous robotics. These are the type of things that we have some quality research going on over there. And we are quite connected with industry through research sponsorships and others, and with many entities throughout Europe. So it's not just a little Lorraine thing. We really make an effort to connect as much as possible, and really, this is just a sample of our connection. And of course, with Atlanta, we're very, very connected with the Atlanta campus. So in that sense, it's pretty unique. This gives you an example of a list of the actual labs we have in the UMI, and you can see it's pretty much deep tech kind of thing, hardware kind of things. A lot of mechanical, a lot of electrical, a lot of computing science, and things like that. And as I mentioned, we've been very successful in getting some pretty good-sized contracts from the EU, from industry, from the ANR, you know, Agence Nationale de la Recherche, and so forth. The Lafayette Institute is really an exciting and challenging thing that we started about 2 years ago. It took a long time to get there. But basically, we were asked by the French local government to really put together the know-how of Georgia Tech. You know, our reputation is really impressive there, and they know we're pretty good at innovation and those kind of things. So they put together essentially a building with a lot of high-tech equipment, clean rooms and all that, focused on optoelectronics, so it's materials for optoelectronics, creating higher TRL things for devices, materials, devices, sensors, and in a variety of applications. And it's a significant investment from the French and European sources. The idea is really for our faculty, our research, to have this tool, and industry, to have this toolbox available to develop new technological brick technologique, some new technological know-how that push the envelope and enable industry then to really develop new processes at scale. The types of technology we have are focused on organic and inorganic semiconductors, some very advanced equipment that is actually quite complementary with what we have in Atlanta. And the type of market, if you will, that we can tap with those new devices or sensors are, for instance, energy, environment, health, biotech, information, ICT, transportation, and even security. These are the two sort of biggest equipments there. There's an MOCVD reactor that allows to grow gallium nitride semiconductors, and some really exciting research going on, both fundamental and then really higher TRL and tech transfer that is attracting a lot of interest from industry. And then the organic vapor phase deposition cluster tool that enables really organic, really thin film plastic semiconductors to be developed. So two different technologies around the same theme, and that's what it's all about. This, I think, is my last slide. I just wanted to give an example. This is one example of a startup that came out of the Lafayette Institute and GTL, based initially on a research contract, by the way, that came from Peugeot PSA on developing a gas sensor to measure, pollution and gas emission. And then we realized that the market actually for measuring environmental pollution was much more interesting, or at least bigger potential. And we have a former PhD student who started his company, and you can read as well as I can. But again, it's just to show that we really do basic research, but at the same time very focused on innovation, transformation towards industry. That's the DNA of Georgia Tech, and that DNA is there in METS as well. And you will hear from Keith, from Siva, from Paul Voss here about the entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem in METS. It's very much linked with the one in Atlanta. We want to grow that because I think it's a differentiator for Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech's name in Europe is already getting more and more recognized, and we need your help to connect and your help to maybe mentor some of these startups and so forth. So I just wanted to give you this sort of general overview of GTL. Very exciting things going on, and I just wanted to make sure you were aware of it because it's in your neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Siva Raghupati now that tells us about CreateX, which I think is a quite exciting innovation at Georgia Tech. Thank you, Siva.
Thank you, Alessandro. Good afternoon, everyone. It's I'm really thrilled to be here to share with you the story about CreateX and how it's dramatically changing the support that Georgia Tech is providing to our students to launch successful companies and to become more entrepreneurially confident. Before I tell you a bit more about CreateX, I'm going to play a short video. It's only 2 minutes, but it'll allow you to hear from the students directly.
Platform that connects massive internet icons with their massive fan bases through video games.
So CreateX is still a very young initiative. We are 5 years old, and we started the whole thing just as an experiment, and it's really proven out that we are impacting students in a very positive way. This is our mission statement in CreateX. Our mission is to instill entrepreneurial confidence in our students and help them launch successful companies. And these two goals, entrepreneurial confidence and helping them launch successful companies, they're not redundant because we don't think every Georgia Tech student will go off to do a startup. So in our experience, about 10% of the students that we work with end up becoming founders. But even those 90% of students who don't do startups, we think we've made them entrepreneurially confident wherever they go to work. They might go to work for GE or Caterpillar or Qualcomm, and they can be entrepreneurially confident within those organizations. Our goal, this is our 10-year goal, is to make Georgia Tech the #1 startup campus in the country. And there are a lot of metrics that we track in terms of number of startups we have to launch and the number of students that we engage with every year. But that's the goal that we've set for ourselves, to make Georgia Tech the preeminent startup campus. So any high school student, when they are considering going to college and they are entrepreneurially minded, we want them to come to Georgia Tech. And we realize we have a long way to go to get there, but we have a plan in place. And how do we work with our students? So we work with our students through an array of programs. We categorize them into 3 buckets. We call them learn, make, and launch. Learn is classes that we teach around entrepreneurship. An example class, and you heard that in the video, is a class called Startup Lab, which is offered to sophomore students, and they learn a methodology called evidence-based entrepreneurship, where they have to spend a lot of time with their customers trying to validate if an idea that they want to work on is real in the market. And just to give you a sense, we have about 100 students do the class every semester, and between the 100 students, they talked about 5,000 customers during the course of a semester. So it's a completely game-changing experience for the students, having the confidence to go talk to potential customers and understanding what is it that needs to be built. So that's learn. Make, we run research and prototyping programs where students are building prototypes along the way of launching a startup. I know a lot of you have obviously graduated from Georgia Tech. You must have done something called senior design or capstone before you graduated. Now there is a CreateX capstone. What that means is you can get senior design credit for building a prototype, but you're building the prototype for your venture. So you're a student, you have an idea, you can be building a prototype and get senior design credit for doing it. And we give small grants and mentorship in order for the students to do the research and building prototype. So that's make. Once they've gone past the learn and make, the last piece of what CreateX provides to our students is launch. So we run an on-campus startup accelerator called Startup Launch. So far, we've been running it only over the summer. That could change down the road. But over the summer, we've taken students who are interested in founding their companies, and we provide them legal services, accounting services, funding, space, and visibility so that they can launch their companies. So that's the sequence. And the reason we have this sequence is that it doesn't matter whether the student is an undergraduate student or a graduate student. It doesn't matter which year of study they are in. They have a CreateX program that they can go to in order to become more entrepreneurially confident. And so we start engaging with students the first day that they are on campus. And we continue to work with them till they graduate. And the provost mentioned this. In the last 5 years, we've helped launch 115 companies, all founded by our students. These are real companies, legal entities delivering product to market. And these are a subset of the logos of the companies that we have launched. And I'm sure you're curious as to, well, how are these companies doing? And here are some high-level statistics. Out of the 115 companies, 92 of them are still active. And overall, and actually this number is now increased, but our most successful startup has done over $60 million in revenue. So these are fresh undergrad students out of Georgia Tech. Being able to run a company that's doing tens of millions of dollars in revenue is obviously pretty amazing. This startup that's doing the most revenue has created almost 30 jobs right in Tech Square, the area that the provost pointed out. Another thing that we're really, really proud of is entrepreneurship. The female representation is historically low, but Georgia Tech being the school that it is, we're so happy that about 40% of our companies right now are founded by female founders, and we're trying to grow that number. And obviously, this is really, really important when you're doing an entrepreneurship initiative to look at, okay, how are these companies doing from a return on investment standpoint? And when the companies exited CreateX, these 115 companies, the total valuation of these companies was about $20 million. And as of today, the valuation is north of $150 million. And so the companies we're not just launching these companies, but they're continuing to thrive, and they're continuing to deliver ROI for investors in these companies. So I've given you sort of the macro numbers. What I thought would be useful before I wrap up is to give you a sense for what are these startups, right? What kind of startups can students create while they are in school? And here are a few examples. Fixed is a company that came out of our first cohort. They are in the automotive software space. So I'm sure a lot of you here are car owners. Today, when my car has some problem and I take it to the mechanic and I give the mechanic goes in, does some analysis, comes back and says, Siva, there is this problem with your car and it's going to take you $400 to fix it. I have no idea whether the $400 is what I need to spend, whether the problem is real, right? And so there is a information asymmetry that exists at that point. The mechanic knows more about my car than I do. Fixed solves that problem. So there is a hardware that plugs into your car dashboard. There's a software on your phone. When things go wrong with your car, you get to know in sort of layman understandable language what is the problem with the car, how much should it cost for you to fix it, even before you take it to the mechanic. So then when you take it to the mechanic, you're more confident about what it should cost for you to get it fixed. Fixed has sold over 1 million units of their device. And that's remarkable in a short span of 2 to 3 years that they've been able to sell over 1 million units. Gimmi Vending is, again, a hardware-software product that sells to vending machine operators. So today, if you're a vending machine operator and you run 1,000 vending machines, the way you do accounting and inventory management is still very rudimentary. You hire a few people, you have them go vending machine to vending machine. They take paper notes of what the inventory levels are and what the revenue is, and they come back and report to you. It turns out that this is obviously a very suboptimal process, and Gimmi fixes it through technology. So there's a hardware that plugs into your vending machine, and it's got wireless capability. And so as a vending machine operator, you get readouts from these 1,000 vending machines real time. And you can do really, really cool things like dynamic pricing. And one of the new things in the US is this concept of micro vending, where the table at the back of this room, you can just walk over and pick something, and it automatically gets charged to your account. And Gimmi is serving that space. So Gimmi is in about 100,000 vending machines now in the US. And I have to say, the CEO of Gimmi is still a student. He's still working on his degree, so he's not graduated, but he's committed. He's going to graduate. Just to give you a sense of the diversity of the problem students work on, Grubleaf Farms is another company that's doing really well. They sell chicken feed to farmers that grow chicken, right? Except that this chicken feed is not made from fish, which is what historically chicken feed is made from, but it's made from soldier fly larvae. So they take soldier fly larvae, they harvest the larvae, and the larvae end up being very protein rich. The larvae end up actually are fed with organic waste, and the organic waste actually comes from restaurants. So Grubly actually charges the restaurants to take the organic waste away, but then they feed the larvae and they harvest the larvae into making the chicken feed. They're doing really well. They're doing about $200,000 a month in revenue, and they're growing very rapidly. A couple of quick other examples. Synapse is a drink that you can now go on Amazon and you can buy. It's an energy drink that does not have caffeine in it. So they have a secret recipe that relies on nootropics to make the energy drink, and they are doing really well. They just closed $1 million round of fundraising, and you can buy it off Amazon today. And then last, we think this is going to be one of our big successes out of the CreateX program. It's a company called Steward. If you're familiar with Airbnb, Steward is Airbnb for warehouses. So if you have space that you want to rent out for warehousing, you go to Steward. And Steward just closed a $3 million round of financing. And the student, Sean Henry, when he started working with us, he was a freshman. He was a freshman student launching this company, and they're doing remarkably well. The company Synapse, I pointed out in the previous slide, they actually use Steward for warehousing. So with 115 companies, now there is enough of an ecosystem where the students rely on each other in growing their businesses, right? So those are some quick examples to give you a sense for what these startups are. And I'm sure you're thinking in your mind, okay, how can I help? And we will take any help that you're willing to provide, right? So these are some ways that we engage with alumni. If you can show up for our events, that's great. Our big event is in third week of August, Demo Day. We do it at the Fox Theater. It's a beautiful event. If you're in the US at that time, we would love to see you there. We're constantly looking for mentors. So I was talking to John Christoph. By the way, if you haven't seen his Heartbit, you should. It's just a beautiful, beautiful product. But somebody like him, we have a lot of medical device startups. So I'm sure they can do with mentorship. And mentorship is something you can modulate. You can spend 1 to 2 hours a week mentoring remotely teams that are coming out of the CreateX program. We would love to have you as speakers at our events. We do have an advisory council for CreateX. If you're able to devote more resources, we would love for you to come and serve on the council. And a lot of our startups obviously are looking to raise money. The 5 startups that I just told you, they've all raised $1 million plus in venture financing. But there are more startups that are raising money. So if you do angel investing, or if you're part of an investment network, we would love to connect you with those startups. So these are some ways that we can you can engage with us. Again, we need people like you for us to be successfully growing this program. So thank you again for your time. And I will be around once the event is done. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we now ask Keith McGregor to come and talk about innovation and all that's happening there?
Thank you very much. I think I'm that one, if you don't mind. That's me. Okay, hello. I'm Keith McGregor. I'm the director of Venture Lab and also the executive director of iCore South. And I want to talk to you about the combination of those two things, and also would like to pick up on this theme of DNA as well, because I think that one of the things we've realized is there's a certain something that each of us counts on when we meet a Georgia Tech alum. And I'm a triple jacket, and there's certainly things I count on when I meet a Georgia Tech alum. And one of those important things that I think you're hearing from us is that not only are we all lifelong learners, but one of the most important things we can learn to do and teach each other to do and help each other do is to be entrepreneurial and to pursue those sorts of passions and keep up to date with what that might mean. And so let me talk a little bit about this. This iCore program started about 6, 7, 8, wow, can it be that many years ago? But there was a phone call that was made, a set of phone calls that was made from the NSF. And the first phone call went to a fellow named, it went from Eric Arkelicht at NSF, a program director. It went to Steve Blank first. And Steve Blank is a well-known pundit in startup land. He's been very successful over time. And so Steve Blank's first question back to NSF is, what's NSF? He didn't even know what NSF was. But he was teaching entrepreneurship at Stanford and Berkeley, and that class was very well regarded. He's one of the fathers of the lean startup movement, even. The next phone call actually turns out to have been to us and to Georgia Tech, because Georgia Tech was, in the view of NSF, one of the very few places on the planet where entrepreneurship was being practiced exceptionally well, even then. And it is much more so now. And you just heard from Siva on how incredible CreateX actually is. And so this program, this I-Corps program, was actually focused on turning the investment that the National Science Foundation has made into all the nation's researchers and into Georgia Tech's researchers, and getting that investment in fundamental research to also have an impact on society, because that's part of the mission of NSF, is to have a big impact on the human condition. And they want to do it through startups. So the I-Corps program is the premier startup program for the government of the U.S. in startups. We have taught through this national program more than 1,400 teams. And all of the R1s through the nation have been strongly encouraged to adopt this program. It turns out that even as dysfunctional as the view of our Congress might happen to be at the moment, there is a bill that has been passed by the House and a bill reintroduced bicamerally and bipartisanly in both houses just this month to expand the I-Corps program to be very much more broad than its current underpinnings. And every expectation is that will pass. And Georgia Tech is at actually the heart of it. So we started out with 2 nodes in a network for entrepreneurship, ourselves and the University of Michigan, who we hear has a pretty decent entrepreneurial program and an engineering school. And it has expanded. There are now 9 nodes. I put some of the logos here. All of the R1s that we would want to be in company with are actually part of this network of learning and teaching entrepreneurship across the nation. And we are the only campus who has a foothold over here. And we have expanded over here, and I will elaborate. So what happens when you have a network of this? We are trying very hard to create an armada of entrepreneurial researchers across the nation, as well as instigate startups based on their research. That's what I-Corps does, and that's what we do. And so we want to do it for all of these good reasons. We want to get that research out into the world and make it have an impact. We want to create good jobs across the nation and the world with the output of Georgia Tech and the output of the nation's researchers. So it's based directly on the things that you've heard about, the lean startup movement. And we follow this very, very strongly. It uses the tools of modern entrepreneurship, the business model canvas, and we treat it as a connected graph. And we create businesses using this. We do not use anymore the old approach of just build something and hope somebody is there to catch it. But we very much interact with the world and the market as we're building things and interactively iterate our way toward the solution that we have in mind and the impact we have in mind. And very frequently, we realize that we are wrong at the outset. And this turns out to have been the demise of so many, many companies. In fact, I think if you survey entrepreneurs across everywhere, the one thing that they will say, and perhaps in some coded language, actually is that the thing that killed them was they got the market wrong. They didn't understand their customer. And so, shockingly for Georgia Tech, in a fashion, because again, I say this as a triple jacket and having been through the older and the newer tech, it's not sufficient to focus on technology. We have to actually develop a little bit of people skills in our method as well. And we do. Sometimes it's painful. We use this agile approach even in places where you would think it would not apply. I have been a chronic doubter. I've been in Steve Blank's ear constantly as to it can't work in this domain, it can't work for that domain, it will never work in healthcare. And it has worked every single time in every domain to take an agile approach. We have yet to find a place where it won't work. So we've had it. Here's what we've done. We've defined it and taught it nationally. All sorts of places across the U.S. We have taught more a percentage of the national teams than any other university. We've taught more than a quarter of all of the national teams that have gone through the program. And we've spread it regionally. We cover in I-Corps South a 10-state region. I know there are 9 up here, but we have been fighting back and forth about Kentucky. I don't know why you fight over Kentucky, but we do. And so we squabble with our Michigan folks about Kentucky. But we have a 9-state region, and it also includes Puerto Rico, and I will cover that in a moment. And our intent for I-Corps South is to take this traditionally looked upon not exactly as the hub for entrepreneurship and create as many entrepreneurs across this Southland as we humanly can during the time of our existence as I-Corps South. And we have to do that by not only creating entrepreneurs, but by creating people who help us create entrepreneurs. And so we partnered with the University of Tennessee and the University of Alabama. We'll be expanding that to a couple of other R1s over the next couple of years. But we have a lot of help across the South too. And we've taught it a lot. So far, we've taught to perhaps more than a couple of thousand entrepreneurs, almost 1,000 teams, and we'll crest those things quickly. We'll be easily double this in 2 years' time. We taught it at CDC there in our backyard. We taught 3 cohorts at CDC. And that's different because they don't want their researchers to leave. They just want their research to have an impact. And so we have to change the way in which we talk about entrepreneurship to also allow it to happen when you are regarding social concerns. We have had a great time in Puerto Rico teaching this. We've taught 7 cohorts down there so far, and we have a couple of more on the books for this year. And it's having a pretty fantastic impact on the island, because what we know is that every small business has an entrepreneur at the helm of it. But many people are infatuated with the Silicon Valley approach to entrepreneurship, and they do not see their fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers, aunts and uncles and cousins as being entrepreneurial. They just see them as having started a small business. And we changed that equation for the students on campus within CreateX, as well as the researchers and the folks that we teach it to everywhere we go. It's fantastic in Puerto Rico. We've taught it in France 3 times. We just finished up a cohort there in November, and we've learned some things, and we are looking to expand this. In fact, one of the things that I want to have a chat with some of you about is how we can take this to the entirety of the continent and use Georgia Tech as the hub for I-Corps in Europe. And we've learned a bit on how to teach it. We've trained the national faculty. We've trained more than 20 instructors who teach it nationally how to teach it. But we also run a thing called Instructor Academy, where we teach people all over how to teach it. We've taught instructors across the South how to teach entrepreneurship. We've taught instructors from Mexico how to teach it. And we've taught a lot of people in Puerto Rico how to teach it. In fact, down in Puerto Rico, we've taught more than 500 faculty members on that island how to teach entrepreneurship using the techniques that we use in CreateX and I-Corps. And of course, what we learn how to do is not kept to us. We teach it very frequently, and we share the curriculum as we teach it back and forth. We share it with our colleagues on the Tech campus. All of our programs are, in one way or another, connected to one another through people like SIVA. And we share the curriculum back and forth in a very unprecedented way, and we share it nationally. So that every time one of us steps in front of a classroom to teach entrepreneurship, we are in possession of the curriculum that is only it's less than 3 months old. It's the latest distillation of the thinking about entrepreneurship. And this, by and of itself, is unprecedented in the nation. So, a quick look at Venture Lab. Venture Lab is a group that I manage that looks to commercialize the efforts at Georgia Tech out of the research that we do. And we get a lot of work. You can imagine that Georgia Tech is a very inventive place. And we see at least 2 new ideas for a startup every business day. We find them by people showing up at our door. We walk campus. We get informed about every paper that's published on campus. And we seek out the professors that publish those papers. And we've done a lot of hard work. One of the numbers up here that ought to jump out is the bottom number. Of the startups we've helped create, those startups have raised more than $2 billion in venture capital in and around more or less the Atlanta area, the backwater, and not Boston or Silicon Valley. We are completely aligned with I-Corps, and the process that we use for commercializing at Georgia Tech is very much a staged process where we sort out the opportunity. We find it, and we decide how it might progress. And then we take it through a very deliberate set of stages that are aligned exactly with this philosophy of I-Corps and evidence-based entrepreneurship. And we're making good progress. And occasionally it's a startup or a spin-out. Sometimes it's a licensing thing, but it's a very well-informed license effort once we've gone through the effort of discovering what the market is and will bear. I looked this morning before I walked over at the current numbers. Right now in Venture Lab, we are managing, and I know this may be a shock, we are managing more than 411 startups or spinouts based on Georgia Tech IP. These are active, ongoing concerns. And they line up to these areas in our staging. So it's very much a process where we actually use Salesforce to track how things flow through our system. So that is where we stand. This is an enormous amount of economic development power, not just for Georgia, but for the world. And you are a part of it, and you can be an even greater part of it. So I've got an ask. I have a very specific ask, and I'm going to put my contact information up there. We are constantly looking for people to become CEOs of Georgia Tech spinouts. We are constantly looking for people to make connections to customers for those spinouts. And we're constantly looking for people who might be possibly connected to others who would invest in Georgia Tech spinouts. And if you're that kind of a person, I absolutely want to get your card. And I'm looking forward to talking to you. Thanks for the opportunity to say hello. All right.
Matt, Jean-Christophe, and Kurt to please join us on stage.